Imagine embarking on a journey inward that feels as much spiritual as it is psychological. This was the path set out by Carl Gustav Jung, a Swiss psychiatrist and founder of analytical psychology. Jung's approach to the human mind was deeply mystical, emphasizing personal growth through inner exploration. He believed that discovering our true self involves delving into hidden parts of the psyche, an adventure of self-discovery akin to a spiritual quest. In this video, we will explore Jung's key concepts of individuation, archetypes, shadow work, and the collective unconscious, and see how these ideas bridge psychology with spirituality. By understanding Jung's mystical psychology, we uncover how the psyche's depths connect to something greater, guiding us toward wholeness and meaning. Individuation, the journey to wholeness. Individuation is the central pillar of Jung's psychology, essentially the journey of becoming one's true self. Jung defined individuation as the process of integrating the conscious and unconscious parts of the mind to become a more whole and balanced individual. This is not about achieving perfection or some ideal personality, rather, it's about embracing wholeness, recognizing and harmonizing all facets of oneself, light and dark, to develop a unified, authentic personality. Jung believed this lifelong journey toward self-realization is the true purpose of life. In practice, individuation involves confronting inner conflicts and contradictions, and accepting even the uncomfortable parts of our psyche. Through methods like self-reflection, creative expression, and especially the analysis of dreams and symbols, a person gradually brings unconscious elements into consciousness. Jung described this transformative process in almost spiritual terms. It is a quest for the self, an inner guiding wholeness often symbolized by a mandala or divine image in dreams. He saw individuation as a sacred journey of the soul, in which psychology and spirituality meet. By pursuing one's own truth and potential, one experiences personal growth that is psychological in method but spiritual in depth. Key steps or aspects of individuation can be viewed as stages of inner development. 1. Confronting the persona and shadow. We begin by distinguishing our authentic self from the persona, the social mask we wear. This leads to meeting the shadow, the hidden parts of ourselves we have ignored or repressed. Acknowledging and integrating the shadow is the first crucial step toward wholeness. 2. Integrating anima, animus. Jung observed that each man carries an unconscious feminine aspect, anima, and each woman an unconscious masculine aspect, animus. Individuation entails bringing these inner opposites into balance, which Jung called the masterpiece of the process. Embracing qualities of both genders within us fosters psychological completeness. 3. Realizing the self. At the culmination of individuation, one encounters the self archetype, representing the unified psyche, a state of inner harmony and balance. The self can be envisioned as a deeper, divine center within, an archetypal image of wholeness, often likened to the God within. Achieving closer alignment with the self is akin to a spiritual realization, where one feels connected with a greater order or meaning. Jung emphasized that spirituality plays a significant role in individuation. He saw spiritual practice and religious symbols as helpful tools for individuals to connect with their inner selves. In Jung's view, psychological growth and spiritual development go hand in hand. As one progresses on the individuation journey, one may experience a greater sense of purpose and connection to something larger than the ego. This convergence of psychological integration and spiritual realization is exactly where Jung's mystical psychology shines. It treats the quest for self-understanding as a sacred process, ultimately aiming for a state of balance and self-knowledge that has a profound, soulful quality. Archetypes and the collective unconscious. At the heart of Jung's mysticism is his theory of the collective unconscious, a deep layer of the psyche shared by all humans, containing primordial patterns called archetypes. Unlike the personal unconscious, filled with an individual's forgotten or repressed experiences, the collective unconscious is universal. Jung described it as a kind of inherited psychic reservoir that does not depend on one's personal life experiences. It is common to all human beings regardless of culture, a vault of ancestral memory and potential that every mind draws from. This bold idea bridges psychology and spirituality by suggesting that all of humanity is connected at a fundamental mind level. In Jung's words, the collective unconscious is like a universal library or the wise spirit within each person, containing knowledge and symbolism from all of human history. Archetypes are the core content of the collective unconscious, innate symbols and frameworks that shape human thoughts, dreams, and behaviors. We can think of archetypes as the original patterns or blueprints of human experience. They often appear in dreams and fantasies, as well as in the myths, art, and religions of every culture. For example, across the world we find recurring characters and themes: the hero who embarks on an adventure, the great mother, the wise old man, the trickster, and many more. These similar figures appear in stories and legends separated by vast distances and times, which Jung took as evidence that the human mind shares a collective source of imagery. Even without direct contact, different societies come up with strikingly similar myths and symbols. According to Jung, it's because our psyches are structured by the same archetypal templates. Let's look at a few major Jungian archetypes and their meanings. Persona, the mask or social face we present to the world. It represents our public image and the roles we adopt. While necessary for functioning in society, over-identifying with the persona can hide our true nature and feelings. Shadow, the collection of qualities we dislike, reject, or repress, our dark side. It often contains primitive, negative, or feared aspects of ourselves, but also untapped potential. The shadow appears in myths as figures like monsters or evil twins. Facing the shadow is essential for personal growth. Animus. The anima is the feminine inner personality in a man's psyche, and the animus is the masculine inner personality in a woman's. These archetypes represent the unconscious complementary gender aspect. They appear in dreams as a mysterious woman or man and influence our romantic attractions. Integrating anima and animus helps balance one's psyche, the self, the archetype of wholeness and the organizing center of the entire psyche. It symbolizes the integrated self and is often represented by mandala symbols, divine figures, or wise guides in dreams. The self is essentially the God within, as Jung suggested, the fullest expression of our being towards which we grow. These archetypes act as forces that unconsciously direct our feelings and behavior. For instance, the mother-child relationship is shaped by an instinctual mother archetype, and the experience of confronting death might invoke the rebirth archetype. Jung even argued that religious and mystical experiences are guided by archetypes. This is a critical point of bridge between psychology and spirituality. Jung believed that deities, spirits, and mythic figures are essentially archetypal images arising from the collective unconscious. He once remarked that the world of gods and spirits is truly nothing but the collective unconscious inside me. In other words, the human mind projects its inner archetypes outward as gods and myths. By studying myths, religions, and dreams, Jung felt we could study the collective unconscious itself. He famously explored alchemy, Eastern philosophies, and Western religions to find common archetypal threads. For example, heroes slaying dragons in myth symbolized the ego overcoming a challenge to grow, an archetype of transformation. Jung's work revealed a deep unity between the human psyche and spiritual mythology. The psyche naturally produces spiritual symbols, and spiritual traditions across the world are expressions of the collective psyche. This was a revolutionary idea. It suggested a psychological basis for spirituality. Rather than dismissing religion as mere superstition, Jung saw value in it. Religious rituals and symbols can activate archetypes and aid the individuation process. For instance, participating in a ritual might engage the self-archetype, fostering personal integration and meaning. Thus, archetypes and the collective unconscious form a framework where psychology provides insight into spiritual experiences, and conversely, spiritual symbolism enriches psychological growth. Shadow work, embracing the hidden self. One of the most practical and profound aspects of Jung's mystic psychology is shadow work, the process of confronting and integrating one's shadow. The shadow, as mentioned, represents the parts of ourselves that we reject or hide, often because they conflict with how we want to see ourselves or how we want others to see us. It includes our shame, fears, unacceptable impulses, or even positive qualities we've suppressed due to social pressure. For example, someone might repress feelings of anger to maintain a polite persona, or hide their vulnerability to appear strong. Yet these buried elements don't just vanish, they linger in the unconscious and can influence our behavior in unhealthy ways. Jung warned that if we deny our shadow, it will project itself outward. We might start seeing our own darkness in others, leading to prejudice or conflict, or we may find ourselves inexplicably sabotaging our goals. As Jung famously noted, when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside, as fate. In other words, what we don't face internally will control us from the outside. Shadow work is about shining a light on this darkness. It requires courage and honesty to look at our flaws and fears without judgment. Jung saw this as a kind of sacred task, the apprentice piece in the workshop of individuation. By acknowledging the shadow, we rob it of its power. This might involve noticing our disproportionate emotional reactions, which often signal a shadow aspect at play, or examining recurring themes in our dreams, where the shadow often appears in symbolic form, like a pursuer or a dark figure. Techniques like journaling, therapy, or meditation can aid in recognizing shadow traits. For example, if someone consistently feels intense jealousy but refuses to admit it, they remain in its grip. Through shadow work, they would admit, "I do have jealousy in me," explore its roots, and find healthier ways to deal with it. Integrating the shadow doesn't mean acting out negative impulses, it means understanding them and finding their positive intent or energy. An aggressive impulse, once acknowledged, might be channeled into assertiveness to protect oneself or others, rather than denied until it erupts destructively. The goal of shadow work is not to eliminate the shadow, which is impossible, but to accept it as part of oneself. Jung believed this integration is essential for wholeness. In fact, the shadow often holds valuable qualities: creativity, spontaneity, instinctual strength, that we have censored. By embracing our shadow, we reclaim those aspects and become more balanced. Jungian psychologists often say, there is gold in the shadow. What was dark and feared can become a source of wisdom and personal power once brought into the light. For instance, someone timid who rejects their anger might discover that healthy anger can be transformed into passion and boundary setting. Shadow work thus heals inner splits. On a spiritual level, confronting one's shadow has echoes in many traditions. Practices like confession, atonement, or facing one's inner demons in shamanic rites all mirror the idea of dealing with our hidden side. Jung's contribution was framing this in psychological terms, making it accessible as a form of inner work for personal development. He showed that diving into our darkness can be deeply transformative and even spiritual, leading to greater authenticity, compassion for oneself and others, and connection to humanity. As we integrate the shadow, we often feel more whole and at peace, as if a civil war inside us has ended. This integration is a key step on the individuation journey and reinforces how self-discovery in Jung's view is both psychological and spiritual. It involves a kind of inner alchemy, turning the lead of our hidden fears into the gold of wisdom and self-acceptance. Bridging psychology and spirituality. Carl Jung's theories stand out because they bridge the seemingly separate worlds of psychology, the scientific study of the mind, and spirituality, the realm of soul, meaning, and the sacred. Jung did not see the psyche and the spirit as opposites, he saw them as intimately connected. In his work, The Deep Psyche is Spiritual. Here are a few clear ways Jung built a bridge between the two. Universal spiritual symbols. Jung observed that symbols from religious and mystical traditions appear spontaneously in the dreams and fantasies of people who may have never been exposed to those traditions. For example, images like crosses, mandalas, wise old sages, or divine children show up in the psyche. He took this as evidence of the collective unconscious and its archetypes, which form a common spiritual language of humanity. Essentially, our psyche is wired for spirituality, it produces mythic and religious imagery by nature. Thus, psychological processes, like dreaming or imagination, can have spiritual content. By analyzing these symbols, Jungian psychology often parallels the interpretations found in spiritual teachings. The quest for meaning. Jung believed that a loss of spiritual values was detrimental to mental health. He saw many of his patients in midlife suffering from a lack of meaning or a spiritual hunger. His solution was not to prescribe religious dogma, but to help them find a personal spiritual connection through inner work. The individuation process itself was presented as a meaningful journey, a personal myth, that often brings a sense of connection with something greater than oneself. 5. Jung commented that modern people suffer from the decline of religion but seek spiritual experience through psychology. By engaging with their unconscious, through dream work, active imagination, etc., individuals often reported encounters that felt numinous or sacred. In Jung's perspective, therapy could be a sacred journey. God as an archetype. Perhaps Jung's most provocative idea was that God, or the divine, could be understood as an archetype within the psyche. He wasn't saying God is only in the mind, but that our image and experience of God is built into our psychological nature. He wrote that God is experienced like an archetype on the psychic level. This means the human psyche has a predisposition to perceive a greater wholeness or a guiding presence, which cultures have expressed as gods or God. Therefore, exploring one's unconscious can evoke experiences that feel like encounters with the divine, for example, Jung's own visionary experiences that he recounted in the Red Book. In this way, psychology offers a framework to understand spiritual experiences not as hallucinations or mere wish fulfillment, but as something arising from a real, deep layer of the mind common to all humanity. Spiritual practices in psychotherapy. Jung was open to incorporating spiritual practices into healing. He studied Eastern practices like meditation and yoga and compared them to Western alchemical symbolism and Christian mysticism. He often used concepts like mandalas, circular symbols of wholeness. In therapy, patients would draw mandalas to center themselves and reflect their psychic state. He also respected experiences like near-death visions or synchronicities, meaningful coincidences, considering them significant for the person's journey and not dismissing them as irrational. By validating these spiritual-like experiences, Jungian psychology can resonate with a person's spiritual side, making therapy a more holistic healing process of mind and soul. 6. In summary, Jungian psychology doesn't isolate us from spirituality, it provides a bridge to it. Jung effectively said the psyche is the sacred temple where we encounter the divine, inside us. Our unconscious is a source of wisdom that can guide us much like a spiritual teacher. This integrated viewpoint has inspired many people who find traditional religion lacking but still yearn for depth and meaning. Jung's ideas give permission to explore spirituality in a personal, experimental way, through the landscape of one's own dreams, symbols, and inner figures. It's a deeply personalized spirituality, a direct dialogue between the self and the self. This approach has influenced fields like transpersonal psychology and modern self-help spiritual movements, which blend meditation, myth, and psychology. By honoring both science and mystery, Jung carved a path for self-discovery that is truly holistic, addressing mind, heart, and spirit as one. Conclusion. Carl Jung's mystical psychology invites us on a profound journey of self-discovery. By engaging in individuation, we strive to become whole, integrating our conscious identity with the hidden truths of our unconscious. We meet our archetypes, those ageless symbols that connect us to all of humanity, and in doing so, we realize our lives are threaded into a much larger tapestry of meaning. 5. We turn inward to face our shadow, embracing the parts of ourselves we once ran from, and find that even in the darkness there is light and potential. Jung shows that to know thyself is not just a psychological task but a sacred one. As we peel back the layers of persona and ego, we encounter something numinous at our core, a self that mirrors the divine. In Jung's view, psychology and spirituality are two sides of the same coin of human experience. Through concepts like the collective unconscious, Jung demonstrated a unity among people that is reminiscent of spiritual oneness, a collective soul of sorts shaping our dreams and aspirations. By valuing myth, intuition, and inner experience, he gave legitimacy to the spiritual quest within the realm of psychotherapy. For anyone seeking personal growth, Jung's ideas encourage us to look beyond the material facts of life and into the symbolic, meaningful experiences that truly shape us. This outlook remains highly relevant today. In an age when many feel spiritually adrift, Jung's psychology shows a way to reconnect with the soul, to find purpose and healing by listening to the wisdom that wells up from our own unconscious. It bridges the gap between science and spirit, reminding us that exploring our psyche can be a path to something transcendent. Ultimately, Jung's mystical approach teaches that self-discovery is a sacred journey, By understanding and integrating our inner archetypes and shadows, we don't just heal psychologically, we also awaken spiritually. We come to see ourselves not as isolated egos, but as participants in a larger, meaningful cosmos of mind and myth. In Jung's own words, he who looks outside, dreams, he who looks inside, awakes. By looking inside, we awaken to our true nature and to the mystery that we are part of. This holistic vision of the psyche continues to inspire, offering guidance for those who seek wholeness and a deeper connection between the human mind and the spiritual reality it reflects.